Today I want to talk about a few words that a lot of people really hate and don't consider to be real words, but I want to make an argument for them and tell you why they are real words and why it may be okay to hate them, but you don't really have a good argument if you do hate them. First, I want to talk about what language is and what makes language different from something else like math, for example. The big difference between math and language is that math is concrete and factual and a lot of things just exist. Language is completely arbitrary. So basically, all a language is its speakers. It doesn't exist outside of how people speak it. If there were no speakers of a language and no written record, it might as well have not existed. There's nothing innate in a language that makes it exist other than that people have some words that they agree mean a certain thing and have a word order that makes those words make sense. So when we say that something is a word, all it is a big societal agreement on what that word means. So I want to talk about two concepts that linguists call prescriptivism and descriptivism. Now, if you haven't heard this before, they're exactly like what they sound. Descriptivism is just describing a language, and this is what most linguists believe their job is. It's not our job to tell people what to say and how to say it and what's right or wrong. We just view language as this thing, this entity to be studied like anything else. We don't make judgments about things that we study. I do understand that some people get really angry about a lot of misused words or some words they think aren't real. And it kind of bothers me too a little bit, especially with one of the words I'm about to actually defend, like irregardless. If I see that, I kind of cringe a little bit, but you'll see later what I mean when I say it is actually a word, unfortunately. So different cultures and countries have different ways of talking about or preserving their language. So if you look at France and Spain, they both have government-controlled institutions that kind of try to control their language or say this is right and this is wrong, this is what you should say. They try to fight against loan words from English usually. In France, I think they try to cut down on the word weekend. They want people to say end of the week in French instead of the loan word weekend in English. We don't really have any governing body like that, but we still have people who try to fight language change or try to tell other people what's right or wrong. So in America, a lot of people will say the phrase, is it in the dictionary? Or that word's not in the dictionary. That makes it not real. But if you think about what a dictionary actually is, it's just a collection of people, usually a company, that get together and write a book of words that people use. They aren't really in a position to tell anyone what to do. I mean, it's up to you to decide whether you think which company is the main arbiter of the English language, who is the keeper of words that tells you what to use and what not to use. But there's really no reason to trust one company over the other, or to trust any of these companies at all, just to tell you what's right or wrong. So when you try to tell people what's right or wrong, or you're trying to preserve purity in the language, what you're really doing is just trying to preserve the language at a very specific point of time. What we speak today is completely different from English as it was 500 years ago or 1,000 years ago. We couldn't understand them and they couldn't understand us, but we still call it English. Now we may call it Old English and Middle English and Modern English, but it was still the same language as it just evolved over time. But are the words that people said back then wrong? Are the words we say now wrong just because we don't use them anymore? They've changed completely? No, they're not. I don't know what English is going to be like 200 years from now. Will irregardless be an actual word then? It's the actual word? I don't know. But it could be, and that wouldn't be a bad thing. It would just be a change. If we look at the 1700s, when mass literacy started to become a thing in America and Europe, when a majority of the population became literate, people used to spell words completely differently. You would go to one section of the country or one village to the next, and whoever could write would have completely different spelling and probably a completely different way of saying different words. If we look back then, I'm sure there was a huge variety of words that were used in some places and not in others. We wouldn't say some of those words were wrong or some of those words were right, they were just different. if you look at corpus research of Irregardless, and corpus research is simply just looking at a large body of words and looking at percentages of frequency and word order and things. If you look at the frequency of Irregardless, the majority of people using it are actually people saying not to use it. So if you don't want it to be a word, you should probably shut up about it because you are the one using it. It's not actually that common. But it's interesting when it is used in an authentic way. It's usually a more emphatic version of regardless, used to end conversations. So someone would end a conversation saying, well, irregardless, this is wrong or this is right, and then they walk off and the conversation is over. It's just a very end of the conversation word. And another example, which I think is kind of stupid, and I don't think that many people are actually complaining about this, but I saw it on a BuzzFeed list of fake words that people are using, was nauseous. And I said, what's wrong with the word nauseous? They said, you're not nauseous, you're nauseated. And I think that one speaks for itself. I don't know anyone who would think nauseous isn't a word, except for some crazy person who looks in some dictionary that says it shouldn't be used as an adjective and only as a noun, I guess. It just seems like a really weird argument to make. And if that's a weird argument, then pretty much all the others are weird arguments too. Another word which has historically been targeted by grammar Nazis a lot is the word ain't. And like I said in a previous video, ain't has been around for hundreds of years. Chaucer used it. People use it today. There's really no reason that can't be a word other than maybe that it's a little weird that it's a contraction of two things that don't exist, but that's not really a huge deal. One last thing is not a word, but the whole concept of using double negatives in English. And this is more of a dialectical thing. Some dialects will use double negatives for emphasis or just double negatives to say anything negative. And there's actually languages, a lot of languages that use double negatives to mean a negative. Just because in math and in logic a double negative means a positive doesn't mean that it means the same thing in English. You know what someone means when they have a double negative. There's nothing wrong with it. It doesn't really confuse you. It just might make you a little angry for no good reason.